Hey everyone, welcome. We got started here in just a second. Welcome to the Security Revenue Live Show. Really looking forward to our conversation. Looks like I got some folks joining in live with us today. Looking forward once again to our conversation. We were just talking that we got a mix of panelists from different size organizations. We're really focusing on sales enablement and how do you equip teams to win in cybersecurity. And so this is obviously a very niche topic, very important topic, I think, from my perspective and my experience of it doesn't seem like sales ever gets easier. It seems that, and I think in cybersecurity, it's not like, oh, you know what? Everyone's been saying sales has gotten a lot easier recently. And so I think it's a kind of a painful truth that I think in general, sales has only gotten harder, and then cybersecurity is probably no exceptions. The gentlemen that folks on this panel today are a great sample of folks that are focused in sales enablement and how do we help teams succeed. So if you're with us live today, throw any questions you have in the chat. We love to answer questions. Looks like we already got folks throwing stuff in there. Please ask us questions. It will be recorded. I see the question in there that we'll send it out. You can listen to it on demand if you can't attend the entire event, or if you want to share it with your team. So let's jump right in. Let's do some introductions. Rich, do you mind introducing yourself? Give us a background on your current role, size of your organization, maybe size of your team, get some context to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to chat. So, Rich Weimer, I run enablement for a company called Yubico, which is hardware MFA phishing resistance. Chances are, if you're in the security space, you're probably a user of the product, which is always great to see. I lead our global efforts from an enablement perspective, so responsible for essentially all the go-to-market functions within the organization. Small group of three as we're continuing to scale the function out. It's relatively new for this organization, being about a year old since I joined Life, worked with other kind of hyperscalers, worked with companies like Microsoft, crunch a lot of different products. So been able to have the luxury of seeing things from single digits and millions in revenue to hundreds and billions of dollars in revenue. So I had an interesting background and experience and the type of teams that we've led over the years. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks, Rich. Yvonne, you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Ivan Melia. Hello, everybody. I recently joined Strong DM. I came from Palo. I was just commenting how every time I moved in the last 10 years, kind of changed the order of magnitude, the size of the organization. So we're 150 people, two of us on product marketing. We're hiring a leader for sales enablement that will sit with the field org. And it's a Strong DM. We're redefining identity and access management to a variety of practitioners and buyers, from engineering to DevOps to security to identity managers. I'm very passionate about enablement. I used to sit in enablement org, and in my opinion, is a strong component, or should be a strong component, of any PMM shop.
Thanks, Yvonne. I really appreciate that. And Yvonne, I know when we were chatting before, yeah, the reason why, definitely your interesting experience in the product marketing world, but also in the sales enablement. And even before we hit live, we were all talking about how those two functions should work really closely together and are really so excited to dig into that as well.
Absolutely.
Joe, do you mind? Thanks. Do you mind introducing yourself, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. Taylor, thanks for having me. My name is Joe Toole. I'm a director for sales enablement here at Darktrace. I've spent the last 20 plus years in sales management, and sales enablement. Super excited to be here today. I currently lead a team with a focus on onboarding, but we dip our feet, I should say, into lots of different enablement needs at Darktrace. So excited to be a part of the panel and to hopefully have a robust conversation.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. That's great. Yeah, I think I love the experience, like we were talking about earlier. You have different size organizations with at different stages. So I think everyone needs some sort of enablement. Even like the when I first started my career in cyber at an MSP, there was like 6 of us in the entire company. There was some sort of need for how do we obviously just improve sales and obviously go to market with new products, evangelism, onboarding, et cetera. So excited to dive in. Let's talk about kind of the first topic I want to talk about today is maybe even contrasting some of the differences in cybersecurity versus other industries. I'm sure all of us have worked in non-cyber in particular. So I'd be curious, where have you all seen kind of the main differences for sellers? And then how is it different, maybe from the sales standpoint? And then also maybe how does that translate into enablement? And I'll start with you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one thing we all know about cyber is the landscape's changing daily, right? So in order to deal with an ever-changing landscape, enablement is really kept on its toes. So I know at Darktrace, our products are literally, being updated, what seems like weekly, right? So the product is continuously enhanced. And while we try to stick to, launches throughout the year, scheduled type of launches, there's always something shifting or changing. And so therefore you've got to do your best, hopefully, to keep that go-to-market team, that sales team aware of the great stuff that is going on. So that's product, and that's really volatile. And so I'd say for the poor sellers in this space, they are constantly, I'm sure, being inundated. So finding a balance where we get them what they need when they need it, but also try not to overwhelm them is a tough balance to strike. And we probably aren't always very successful at it. But it is something we try to do, but it's tough.
Thanks, Joe. Rich, any thoughts?
Yeah, I've been lucky. I've worked across a couple different sectors over the years, right? From consumer goods to, a stint in healthcare to, going into security. And, I think one thing reigns true: trust is a big factor in sales in general. And I would say in cyber, the big difference is that's a factor that you multiply 10x, right? The reality is it's not an industry where people are buying from people that they necessarily like. They have to trust them. And how do you foster trust, right? And alignment goes a long way into that. So as Joe mentioned, when the tides are moving in and out really quickly from a product perspective, keeping that team aligned is critical, and gaining that trust with your customers. So it's something, we try and focus on, and maintaining that alignment, because the second you take a step backwards in cyber sales and you jeopardize the trust of that customer, it's almost impossible to get that relationship back on track. So I'd say that's probably one of the big differences I see, is that we have to be really honed in and well aligned, because if not, it just makes it such an uphill battle to get anything done with your customers in this industry, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with this. I think definitely a high stakes market. Buyers are experts and very technical, which sometimes just drags and increases the sales cycles. So what I'm saying in terms of the skills and how it's different from some of the marketing I used to do in a non-security product about 10 years ago is that there's a greater balance between technical depth and sort of storytelling at the business level. But still, you got to understand the complex security workflows, how security teams work with operations, with engineering. And then when I think about the market and, a typical prospect is they want to know about reducing my risk, which is about brand and reputation. It's about sensitive data they collect. So addressing that part becomes very important with the field. Second one, can you improve our team efficiency? Right? This is where it becomes very interesting in terms of organizational dynamics. How do we remove silos, team friction? How can we foster new cultures such as DevSecOps? And then lastly, how do we justify the cost? So I think it's a very challenging, but particularly in security, to talk about this and to enable people to effectively talk about this, focusing on risk to value messaging rather than just talking about features. Show how our solutions can reduce threats, compliance risk, operational burden without too much of fear-mongering marketing or fear-mongering enablement messaging. So I think for me, that balance is what I've seen. Striking that, it's particularly difficult. And one of the things that right now is strong DM that I'm working with is you also have another vector here, which is very different buyer personas. So how do we map solution benefits to some operational efficiency? So I mentioned identity and access management, which is our space. But you have, for IAM practitioners, very specific set of needs. And then you have engineering and development, where you need to help them to maintain velocity in this developer first, multi-cloud, ephemeral world where our apps and data live in. So that becomes even more, I would say, exponentially tricky to strike that balance with such a complexity on sort of both ends.
Thanks. Well, it's interesting. Yeah, great thoughts there. And I took some notes because we might dive deep into a couple more of the things you all three shared. One of the areas actually I'm curious about, which is trust. I think I heard about from multiple angles. Like Joe, you talking about like how do we handle the product updates, and how do we make sure we get the right information to the sellers at the right time so they can, obviously sell and build trust. And I think it ties into a lot of everything else you're sharing, whether it's personas or whatnot. I am curious though, the technical side. So we actually did a field CISO panel a couple months ago, or maybe a month ago, and peer-to-peer selling is a topic that I think is really fascinating in the general sense, but specifically in cyber with field CISOs and having more technical buyers, technical folks sell, technical GTM folks sell to technical folks. So I'm curious how with this not only need to build trust, right? But and actually close deals, and even being able to go to the depth, or even tell stories or do ROI, having that technical depth. I'm curious, any thoughts on how you enable your sales team from the technical side and actually having that technical depth so they can be a peer, maybe not equivalent to a field CISO, right? Having that level, but there's yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest criticisms GTM gets is we're not our buyers, right? And we don't have that experience. We don't have decades of being a CISO. We don't have decades of being a security practitioner. So how do you equip the organization to kind of fill that gap? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And if we could wave a magic wand and give everybody from the new hire to the people that are already in the field, all of that technical knowledge and all of that experience, we'd be billionaires, right? But we're not. So to your point, we have folks that hopefully, if we've got the right hiring profile, we're bringing people in who have sold in the space or at least sold in tech, and understand hopefully how to do good discovery, how to do the things that they need to do. But then you run into how do you help them understand what they should be asking, what they should be probing. Yvonne brought up personas. I know at Darktrace we spend a lot of time on what can we expect the various personas that you may encounter to care about, and then to try to build and have conversations around that as opposed to getting right into the technical details of our product. So that's where the value is, right? I've never been a CISO. I'm not a CISO. So I don't plan to be a CISO, but I doubt they roll out of bed in the morning and say, I'm going to go out and buy X today. What they do roll out of bed, though, and think about is, what problems do I have to solve for? How do I go to my board and show them that the things we're doing are protecting our environment and our attack surface is safe? Those are the types of things. So if we can enable our people to have those type of level conversations, our goal at Darktrace is that they should be able to have those fairly early, and then we can bring in the SC or somebody, discovery meeting 2, discovery meeting 3, whatever the case might be, to start to pull back the sheets a little bit, get under the hood, and start to ask for some more of that technical discovery. But we really are trying to focus on them being able to have a value discussion and not go right to product, not go right to that, but understand what, I hate the question, but that trite question is, what is indeed keeping them up at night? What are the things that they've got to figure out and they've got to account for, right? And then how are they doing that today? Is it working for them? Great. If it is, then this will probably be a short conversation. But if it's not, let me understand a little bit more about what the problems are. What are the implications of that pain? And then go into selling, if that makes sense.
That's great. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I've got one little pushback on that, is that if you foundationally set up your systems, and in my opinion, the technical knowledge is actually getting much more democratized today than it's ever been before. With new systems and tooling that we have in place, being able to get technical answers is actually really simple. If you have a well-documented product in security, I think a lot of us benefit from a never-ending deluge of technical documentation that we need to get through. It's impossible to memorize it all, but the right tooling will help pull those answers to the forefront a lot easier than it has in the past. And I think in some of those roles, you're 100% spot on, and the getting a technical answer is just not enough. I think that part's getting easier. It's the conversation around it, right? Like when you think, we have solution engineers, right? And most of the orgs that we work with, we have those technical counterparts to our sellers. And being that technical know-it-all is going to become less and less meaningful over the years as questions are much easier to get answered. And it's really going to be that solutioning and the conversations they're having with the technical counterparts to understand what they're trying to accomplish and not just, answer in the multiple choice factors, right? It's like, well, I need this, well, I can do X, Y, Z. It's like, what does that really mean? How do you peel back the covers on that? So I think we're at a really cool moment of change from just technology in general. And I think, a lot of these systems that are coming, although I wish I could be one of the billionaires that solve it. I don't think we're quite there yet, but people are making a lot of money, attacking some of these complex issues along the way.
I think you guys covered it very well. I agree. Discovery is critical, and there's always an improvement that can happen on that front. When we push agenda, we burn bridges, and that happens when we go too deep, too fast, and pitch instead of understanding the person we speak with. How can we learn about their metrics, their options to accelerate or champion anything, and help them in their life, in their role? That really is the key. I will just add one small perspective from a product marketing angle is if we are able to be authentic, accurate, and actionable with our messaging and positioning, it will help downstream a lot and translating this into assets and into programs that Enablement would develop with the field, which will add another good layer of credibility into things that we talk about when we talk about things such as market realities, right? And then the capabilities. And then the last thing, I think one of the maybe concrete examples of exercises and assets that have worked well in the past, and Joe mentioned this, was persona-based coaching. Show a little bit around the careabouts of different personas, buyers, and how that really plays. So an example would be now in my world today, between auditability, least privilege, visibility, and then somebody could care about completely different things like engineering. I only care about velocity, frictionless access, non-intrusive tooling, and then finding that sweet spot and then bringing in the value at the table at the right time with the right persona. It really helps here.
I love it. Thank you all. That's super helpful. And I think that it resonates with definitely my experience of obviously being really focused on the end person you're communicating with and working with, and especially with buying committees and the dynamics of that, and having obviously people in different roles. And then lastly, I think being close to your customer, really understanding them. If you haven't been in their shoes, right? Or even if you have, right? Like things have changed, and your ability to connect with folks and connect with people's current challenges is super important. And so really resonate with that. And there's actually a little thing I always remember, or way to continue to remember this concept, which is this idea of be like Daniel Day-Lewis. Excuse me. I'll go on a quick tangent, but it's this idea of Daniel Day-Lewis is an actor. He's the only actor that's won 3 Academy Awards for Best Actor. He's won the most Academy Awards of anyone, and he's amazing actor. But he retired. He's actually coming back, but he retired at one point because he would spend years in the role of whoever he was playing. And he kind of become consumed by it, right? And it was this extreme. And I think as go-to-market folks, whether you're enablement or product marketing or selling or customer success, is how do you have that level of commitment and understanding your buyer? And I think reading what your buyer reads, getting certifications, or continuing to have that experience and knowledge from what your buyer is experiencing, and always continuing to push yourself to understand them better and understand their challenges and needs, and even things they don't even know too, right? Because I think if you have a very transactional approach, you are people don't always know what they need, right? Especially in cybersecurity, where it's super complex. There's so many different factors. So even just asking them if they have a problem, they may not even know if they have one, right? And so how do you guide them into obviously a value conversation, like Joe was saying, and understanding the problem, and then being that resource for them. Before we hit live, that we talked a lot about. And actually, real quick, if you have any questions that are here live, please throw them in the chat. Love to, if you have any specific questions around enablement, please throw them in the chat. Before we hit live, though, we talked about, we were talking about, working with other functions. We talked about a little bit earlier about product marketing. I'd be curious, kind of going back on that, how have you all, what are things you've learned from working cross-functionally? Because enablement, it sounds like, especially in large organizations, works obviously very cross-functionally with other teams. So I'll start with you, Rich. Any thoughts on, how do you work with, obviously depending on your size of org, but any thoughts on the cross-functional nature of it, and how do you kind of pull those teams together, and kind of be a filter too, it sounds like too, and kind of being a way to make sure that people get what they need when they need it. How have you worked cross-functionally?
Yeah, and I'm trying to work in I'll drink your milkshake joke if you've seen There Will Be Blood, but I don't think I can quite pull that off on this answer.
Thank you for your effort.
It's
I appreciate your effort
yeah.
on that.
I was really trying to figure that one out, but I can't quite work it in. It's critical that you are a cross-functional player within the organization. I always tell folks, as an enablement practitioner, leader of teams, someone who's been a seller, done all the above, we can't, this function doesn't sit in an ivory tower and tell people what to do. It has to be in the weeds and understand the business. And that's done a lot of different ways, right? Whether it's user interview, customer interviews, seller interviews, conversational intelligence, actually peeling apart what happens within conversations to understand the impact, in the long run. Yeah, if you can't work cross-functionally in this role, then you're really going to struggle, because you have to take into consideration all the varying opinions and also be the kind of the source of truth and guiding light, and how you actually take those not just to the field, but what is the right way to go. Because you have that cross-functional visibility, you see a little bit of what all the teams are doing, so you can find the balance of, is product pushing one thing too hard? Are we going too hard one way with methodologies and asking too much this way or the other? You become that really a sounding board as well for all those portions of the business. So I think it's incredibly critical. I think in my experience, what's made me do well in such roles is, whether it's working with the on-the-ground salesperson all the way up to the executive level, being able to have those conversations and build those bridges when needed, right? That's something you just have to be able to do. Otherwise, you'll 100% struggle in achieving any form of enablement alignment.
Agreed. This is critical. And I've seen it in the past being called as an interlock function. Typically would sit with enablement, or, somebody would own that. Some of the things on a more practical side that I've seen that worked well is owning, sales leadership, monthly forum, an open table conversation, bringing in, marketing, enablement, and sales with the product team as, guest attendees and speakers. That would work well. And then having a sort of various other open forums between different functions just to manage that pace, and then ensure consistency coming in from the features to launch it, releases, launches, campaigns, content, and then conversations, and ensure that everything is consistent. So that's a big one. And interlock was the function that we used to call that at Palo.
That's funny.
It's almost.
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Rich.
Joe. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say when I was at Oracle, we used the same term. And it's, really enablement is a hub. I kind of see us as a hub, and with a lot of spokes, coming out, and it's really is one of our roles and our jobs is to know what's going on with marketing, know what's going on with product marketing, know what's going on with product development, know what's going on in the sales field, know what's going on with the pre-sales folks, you name it, what's going on with revenue ops. It runs across the board. And that's just the nature of the cross collaboration that you have to try to build. I love your idea, Yvonne, about the calls. We've instituted some of that very thing at Darktrace, which has been met by the field. I can't believe how many people actually attend them. So we branded it. We made it fun. 45 minutes every 2 weeks. Hundreds of people actually show up to it, which, getting salespeople to show up in the hundreds is not easy.
Not easy, but it shows the intent. It shows that they have a vested interest, and that, you advocate for sales. That's your primary job as an enablement stakeholder, is advocating for them. And when they show in those volumes, it's fantastic. It just tells you how much they're thirsty for more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You almost turn into almost like a part-time project manager when you host these calls. I've done these calls for a very long period of time, and it's a forcing function, not just for us to have our stuff together, but as you work cross collaboratively, folks that are giving you dates and you're putting the trust in them to deliver. It's an added push to actually pull things across the line, in my experience. So when I think of enablement and the way in which the function has impact around the org, it's a forcing effect on other parts of the business, not just sales, because you are, greatly said, kind of the hub with many spokes around it. Depending on the size of the wheel, you're not able to pull a spoke off some wheels, right? They may only have a couple, and if you take it off, the wheel just doesn't even roll anymore, right? So that obviously changes with the scales of the organizations, but it's the idea of how far enablement reaches and kind of the importance of the role cross-functionally as well. It's not just something that's nice to have. It really does help keep other teams aligned and on pace to deliver against the expectations they're setting too, which I've always found very, very useful to maintain I'm big on like a rhythm of business being predictable. Like, when you talk trust, like people know where they can show up, know where they can be, know what they're going to get. So maintaining that rhythm of business is critical and something it's very good for any one person to be conscious of.
Super interesting. Really cool. I love that. I love that format, and in almost leadership is what I'm hearing actually in the org and even across those teams where obviously you're advocating for the sales team and they feel that. It sounds like even Joe in your response, but also leadership across the org. And I keep on thinking of like GTM enablement because I know there's some orgs that have started to build out kind of an extension of RevOps or in conjunction with RevOps, or it seems like every 3 to 6 months we have a new GTM function created. So it's hard to keep track of, half joking. But I hear leadership is also what I hear from you all as far as, hey, how can we provide not only an environment for folks to sharpen their skills, but obviously bring all the teams together, which is hugely important in really complex go-to-market organizations, complex go-to-market functions where you have so many different things going on. That's where things I think fall apart. I noticed working with bigger companies, and is that the cross collaboration. It's almost all about that at the end of the day. It's not even so much about the individual functions. It's like, how do we all work together?
Yeah,
because there's so complex. There's so many things going on. It's just go-to-market's continues to get more complex, which I could see why RevOps, sales enablement, all these things have become not only popular, but really important. In the chat, we actually got a question around ROI. Actually, Yvonne, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, no, I was just reading the same thing about the effectiveness. I think we were talking about all these great ideas, right? It's a fast-paced market, there's complexity, and then you have a bunch of creative people who can do really cool stuff for sales that are just thirsty for more. What's the ROI? And, you can have enablement group of as many people as you want, right? You can just keep hiring and doing all these cool projects. But then, yes, at some point, people will ask, what is the effectiveness? I was thinking about it as Joe and Rich were giving all these ideas and good insights, like how big of these teams could effectively grow, and how do you measure that? And then just this question popped up on the effectiveness. I like that. Maybe I can start. I think when I think about effectiveness,
Please.
I think there are two levels here, at least the way I'm thinking. One level is pipeline and revenue, obviously. And the other one is the field adoption and knowledge retention. Generally, extremely difficult to prove. And it may trigger a conversation with sales leadership around ownership and realistic win drivers. It's one of those situations where if you have enablement practice and no one complains, you really can't attribute all of the wins that you're having in the field to that enablement. Somebody would complain about this because maybe it will be an issue with the optics. But if you don't have good enablement practice, then people complain. I think it's a very tough spot for enablers to prove this. I think really because of the optics, because you say, hey, we did all this great stuff and the numbers improved because of us. I think that's a tough statement. So the first part I said, that's easier. Tracking some metrics around obviously attendance, adoption of messaging, engagement in exercises, role plays, measuring some things, demo to close ratio, for example, or opportunity velocity. I think we can do that fairly easily. And then assessments, certifications, and then quality of all those. So we can definitely do that. As I'm talking about, the only example of an ROI metrics that we use to drive some of this conversation at the senior leadership level was a couple of years ago. We ran a pilot project with some of the new types of assets, but we really tried to focus on the 5 or 6 questions that everyone would ask. But we went into great details on those. And then we trained a group of sellers. So we started from persona. It was persona-led. What are the pain points care about? L1, L2 discovery questions, value messages, competitive into details, objection handling, and then some of the market drivers, sort of market context and realities. And then we observed what's happening in real life. We got pretty good results. We were able to pinpoint things such as average selling price increased, the win rates increased, and the deal progression accelerated. They were able to move fast through the gates than the control group. So yeah, that's to me. It's really about those two levels. It's a very difficult spot. And then figuring out this KPIs and metrics that you could capture, and then it will definitely help drive the conversation within the org.
Yvonne, I'm curious if you don't mind me asking a question. So you talked about you gave them things to get better at, right? It sounds like by asking better discovery questions, saying certain things. How did you observe that, or how did you understand that they were doing those things? Were you leveraging like a gong and recording calls, or how did you make sure that they weren't just learning the message, but that they were indeed putting it into practice in their meetings and whatnot?
Yeah, so for this particular thing, we use a tool called AirCover. It was a pretty fantastic tool. It depends, right? I mean, I don't want to go into the AI conversation just yet because this is a more greater question than that. But I'll just say that it kind of depends. It's a balance between people who want to adopt and those maybe who find it, what's the best word I'm looking here, to kind of be a distraction while they're doing what they love doing. So that's what I'm going to say. But the tool is their cover. I think it's very similar to Gong.
Okay.
We're using Gong today, but we were able to really understand what exactly the reports were very detailed. I love that. We were able to get exactly how many hits and keywords were mentioned from the enablement material that I placed in.
Yeah,
so I was able to use that and say, if this resonates well, more than something else. And we were able to also see from the interviews what falls flat so that we can avoid using that. But it was a very high touch project. Most of it was really high quality from enablement asset perspective, training this model.
I think the reason I ask is, I think we can do a great job of enabling people. We can even certify that they know the message, right? We can make them role play. We can have them do they can give us the pitch. They can show us their elevator, pitch, all that sort of stuff. But it's after that. And the frontline manager becomes so critical in enablement, and they need to be our best friends, right? Because the frontline managers help make sure that what people get enabled on is actually finding its way into their talk tracks, into the way they do their jobs, and building that rigor and creating an accountable environment. So we don't want to create a bunch of robots, right? Salespeople are great because they're people and they know how to engage with folks, and the best ones listen well and they ask good questions and they're curious, but we still need them saying some of the right stuff, across the board. And that's a challenge, because to your point earlier, once enablement has sort of created and done the enablement, we can't take all the credit when things are good, because hopefully that manager is coaching and making sure that they're saying those things and doing those things. And they certainly now play a role in why the pipeline increased, why the deal velocity, sped up, whatever the case might be. So I appreciate your thoughts. It's tough, but our frontline managers have to be heavily involved in making sure that stuff is truly adopted and not just learned and then, okay, I checked that box, I'm moving on.
Yeah. It's a tough thing to do if you know your numbers and you understand how you're looking to measure your business. You build that trust, right, in the initiatives that you're putting through. I think a lot of times, when you think of some of the numbers that we talked about high level, you think sales velocity, right? You think open opportunities, win rates, average deal size, cycle length. Those are more outcome driven and not really the leading and conversion indicators that you really need to get under the hood of and understand. So being able to go a couple layers deep into what's important and the outcomes that you're looking to influence, and then being able to be very prescriptive at the level of measurements that you have, as well as kind of where they're at in the process, right? Like I try to break my measurements into leading indicators, conversion, and outcomes, right? You look at the 3 different layers of metrics that are within the organization. And what makes it easier is if you can tie that story together all the way through, great. Like you're going to have the evidence there. But also as you do that and you can dig into those metrics with your leadership teams, sometimes when it is a little bit more obscure to get to an exact measurement, but you can say, hey, based on past experience, and if we look at these leading indicators, all signs say that leading indicators are heading the right direction. If we take the logical leap, if you have the trust in the organization, you have the buy-in to take that next step, or have the trust in what you're doing is heading the right direction. So it really does come down to, just how you measure the ones and zeros of the organization and really what is important, because that to me is the big unlock. And that's what also helps, have when we ask for budget, we ask for headcount, we, try to justify, in a down market, justify keeping everybody, right? Or cutting a function, right? Like being able to answer those questions is hypercritical. And it helps you be a much more strategic partner to the business when you truly understand what you're trying to measure, because it helps you align with those conversations that are, a little bit more executive based. And it's not the hey, I did 10 role plays this month, right? Like, okay, great. What does that really mean to the business and what's that driving? You need to be able to have that story and tie that back to those measurable outcomes to get where you want with your leadership team from an evidence. And ultimately, getting some credit along the way is always nice, but growth in the program, all the other fun stuff that we typically look to do as the business grows.
Thanks, Rich. Really, really interesting. And I think if you go back to the beginning of our conversation and look at kind of even talking about not only the problems that our industry faces, right, and our sellers face and our teams face, understanding that from a go-to-market standpoint, I think is crucial. And I really appreciate all of your perspectives on that. And then figuring out what are the activities, what are the things that need to change, behaviors that need to change, the content they need, whatever, to improve, the enablement. And I think I really appreciate you talking about storytelling, because I think no matter what function you're in, I spent most of my career in marketing and selling as well. And I know in every situation, outside of being selling, which selling is, probably the clearest, if you're an AE or whatever, you have the clearest measurable, close one revenue, right? Most other go-to-market functions, it's harder, especially marketing. Oh my gosh, to prove the ROI of a lot of things we do, or to measure. So I imagine it's probably the same way in enablement, right? Where there's certain things where it's concrete, but building that trust internally with your executives and your cross-functional and to see like, oh wow, they're not only the metrics prove that it's working, but the entire organization, right? Like even the salespeople coming back for training, right? Like if your people are coming back for training and to get more support, that's probably a good indication that it's something's working, right? And how you prove that, obviously very hard. It sounds like in some situations, and I think in any go-to-market, like what's working, what's not working, because even in the chat, there was a follow-up statement around taking credit, right? People taking credit from each other and who gets credit for how these things improved, right? Because it may have been products, great new product feature that came out. But I think that's also some of the flaw of the silo perspective. And the reason why I even have this show or the community at large is trying to break down those silos, because go-to-market is like, hey, if we're all one team, one org, one mission, versus thinking about it of like hit sales against marketing or enablement against ops, or ops versus whatever the other function, and we're all ultimately shooting for the same thing. Obviously the day-to-day and in making sure we prove our value in the organization and make sure we have a job and we get, promoted or whatever our goals are, is obviously another story. But that cross-functional collaboration, I think, is so important. And not everything is measurable. Not every great thing you're going to do, you're going to be able to tie back. Or you could spend a lot of time trying to figure it out. But that's also another flaw too, is like we spend so much time trying to attribute everything instead of just doing really good work, doing good marketing, doing good enablement, doing good selling, et cetera. So appreciate all that. In closing, I think Yvonne mentioned AI. I'd love to hear real quick in closing, this is, a small topic, but AI. I'd love to hear how AI, whether it's an enablement, whether it's in just selling in general, where do you feel like it's at? And where do you feel, what are you excited about? If you are excited about any sort of AI and how to improve either enablement or just improve selling in general. I'll start with you, Rich.
Yeah, I've been being around technology for a while. I think we've, somebody who's tenured at this point professionally in technology, been through this hype cycle that we're in right now, right? Hark back to my days when I was at Microsoft, and it's like everybody's moving to the cloud, right? Cloud first, cloud this, cloud that. And you're like, well, what does that mean? And they're like, well, I don't know. We're just going to the cloud, right? Like like people knew they needed to be talking about it, and they knew that's what drove excitement. But like really, the practical applications of that's really difficult. Fundamentally, I'm a big believer in all things AI. I think improving efficiencies, understanding data, being able to tell correlated stories across complex data sets, I think is only going to get easier. I use it daily for a lot of different things. I think the hard part is where that AI as an industry is today is we're so early on in the race. It's tough to know what the horses to bet on are. So as we think through like organizationally, as we're planning, I have to move an entire enterprise towards a solution. And if I'm changing that because markets are shifting every 12 months, like change fatigue for an organization is a really big thing. If I have an AI-based CMS that is outpaced or outdone by a particular future partner, like I can't swap that stuff out constantly. I can't be in a constant state of change. I have to build those foundations. So I think the hard part right now from my perspective is, okay, how do you cut through the nonsense and how do you place the right bets on the right horses early enough in the race, right? In the race. So it's how do we get creative with contracting? How deep do our POCs goes? We got to spend a little bit more time looking under the hood today because the pace of innovation is going to just continue to rise, and we're going to see a lot of companies that we're probably dealing with today, just overnight, you're going to get a new model released and hey, that was just a wrapper, or that's actually just a feature of an existing platform. So cautiously all in is how I would say I'm approaching AI, and being very, very thoughtful on the partners we do bring in the door.
Thanks, Rich. Joe,
I would say from I totally agree with what you said. So sort of as you build that foundation, also leveraging, it sounds like I'm working one of the three of us, maybe one of the larger organizations. So we've got some of that foundation established. So we're looking at a lot of AI. How do we use it to be innovative in enablement? So I'll give an example. We recently used our learning management system to build out AI-based role plays, which are kind of weird, but they're also really kind of cool. So you actually get to role play with a bot, but we put in the persona information. We put in, kind of the background. We input a lot of this information, and then now our reps have. It's great. It's great to role play with your boss or with a peer, but how often is the boss taking time out to role play with the new rep? So what we're building is a library of discovery, type of role plays. And you can change the products and the personas and the scenarios. And, are you are you competing with somebody in particular that you want to get comfortable with having that? So you can practice that conversation before you go in and have the real one. So that's an example of where we're using AI to do something really cool. And we're changing the game inside of our own organization, because we put that into our onboarding certification process. And I've got managers and reps calling me saying, I saw somebody doing this thing, and what was that? And I want to do one of those. So that's just one way that we're trying to use AI. The other way, I'll say very quickly, then I'll be quiet. If we're leveraging AI to help our sellers, right? So imagine once they're done with a sales call, being able to use AI to compile their notes, to pull assets out of their content management system, so that their follow-up to that prospect is really targeted towards how that call went, what they talked about, potential solutions, and now they can do that in a matter of seconds, as opposed to having to go find all the stuff themselves. That's really powerful. So I think there's going to be a ton of opportunity to use AI inside of enablement, which is exciting.
Yeah, +1 on those conversational bots. Those are incredibly fun. And I always put it to managers, like, our sales team doesn't answer their customers in multiple choice answers, and they don't check a box and provide a canned response. Like, they need to practice how they play, right? Like, it's building a team, right? It's any sports team. They go out and practice, right? So yeah, those are incredibly fun technologies, and it's eerie how good they are already. And it's like seeing fire for a lot of people that haven't done it. Like, the first time they see fire for the first time, it's like, oh my gosh, we can do these things. It's a really fun place to be, for sure.
Love that. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Joe. I know we're a little over time. Yvonne, close us out on AI and your thoughts.
Yeah, depends on the day. Where you caught me here. Look, I have an engineering background. I mean, I understand very well, but there are days where I'm just trying to be as balanced and rounded as Rich said. But I don't know if it's a career limiting move in tech in 2025 to dislike AI. It's just simply because I see a lot of abuse. For sure. Look, I played chess on my computer in the 90s, and it made me better, right? That was a form of, me playing with the bot, right? Or now doing something with ChatGPT. I played with Pascal and expert systems in early 2000s. So that was kind of the foundational level. When I think about my 3 children, I want them to have a foundational level. I mean, I shouldn't start a sentence like this. I want them what they want for themselves. But if they are going to be exposed to things like that, I think that there's ought to be some foundational level of, personality and skills and capabilities and behaviors, just to avoid, too much AI distraction. I still want sellers to grow and develop without reliance on AI that may hinder that growth. It's a tool and the model, not a substitution. So that's why I'm seeing a lot of abuse, because we're just figuring out how to use this to the best extent of what's possible. And you're seeing a lot of inefficiencies in how we've done things before. That's not like, hey, AI is great. No, we messed up before. And now we're just seeing that much faster. So, and then, I think very personalized, augmented enablement, what Joe was saying, it's really spot on in terms of what we could accomplish, content coaching that kind of adapts to sellers' background, their way to deliver messages, and be very personalized to that degree. I think it's what we're probably see. And hopefully we maintain the human touch. I think, and this is regardless of generation. I mean, I'm working with folks that are just straight out of college to Gen Xers and older. They're really in the field, and it doesn't matter. Like people still want a human touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've got a long way to go, and I think the reality of that human in the loop and that human touch is critical, and especially as you think of go to market and sales, like you got a long way to go before that's even a considered reality
Yeah.
on how people will buy, right? Like people will I think it'll be a big accelerant for a lot of things, but it'll also like magnify the human experience a little bit in these personal touches. Like it's going to go much, much further and be much more important to people over the years to come, which I think is super important and exciting.
Yeah. Until we start selling to agents, I think I really appreciate even Yvonne, all your perspectives, but having the human perspective and how do we use AI to like not think about AI agents, but think about almost hybrid AI or using technology to help just do what we have always done really well, right? Even from like building relationships or providing value and things that we should always be focused on. And how does AI help us do that? And versus how does it replace? I mean, eventually I could see down the road, obviously, even with e-commerce, right? That's replaced human connection, replaced humans interacting with humans, right? So eventually that's going to it already is, right? People are, discovering, right? Maybe the discovery process of buying cybersecurity is not through humans, right? Most of the time, or maybe it's word of mouth, but it's happening in digital formats. It's happening on Google or ChatGPT or whatever. And so that's an evolution. I imagine it's going to only happen more, in the buyer journey where more of the interaction will be done through technology, right? And or agents or whatever. But for now, all of our buyers are people. So you can't disregard that. And it can be a differentiator. I think even Joe or Rich mentioned that as a differentiator of how you go to market and how you sell is like, how can we equip humans to be able to sell better and be able to build relationships and provide value and all that fun stuff. And hopefully AI can help us along the way, and we don't lose the human element in the connection, and it also doesn't a distraction, right? Because AI can only probably teach you how to sell to other AI at its finest. Humans can help you teach you how to connect with other humans, and we have that ability to have that shared experience, right? And have those whatnot that AI does not have. So big topic, and I know we're way over time, so we'll wrap it up here. Thank you three for your thoughts and your perspectives all around enablement. It's such a big, important topic, and every organization, could have started with this, is experiencing some sort of need for how do we improve, our sellers, and how do we improve our overall go-to-market, but specifically for sure, not the sales role and that. So really appreciate your insights. Thanks everyone for the questions in the chat. We had some great questions. And we will catch you all next time on the Security Revenue Live Show. Thanks again, Rich, Joe, really appreciate all your times. Everyone, take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Joe, Rich, Taylor. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.